Hi, welcome to Strategy, Leadership, and Impact with your host, Blake Repine. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Strategy, Leadership, and Impact. I hope you've been well since the last time you listened in. It's an incredibly busy time of year right now, so heading in toward the end of our financial year, just 3 short months really. 1 July is when the new financial year starts, so getting ready to do all the end of year stuff that's required, but also getting ready for next financial year. So we're doing budgets, we're looking at capital projects, just an incredibly busy time at work. So it's always important during these busy times that we take time to sit back, reflect, and think about what we're doing and actually preparing for the future, which is what gave me the idea for this week's episode. And it's around strategic thinking, but not what is strategic thinking necessarily. We will talk about that a bit. And if you want a bit more in-depth discussion around what is strategic thinking, you can go all the way back to episode 1 of the podcast. That was my very first episode where I talked about what is strategic thinking. I might go back and re-listen because hopefully the podcast has improved since those early days. But I will talk about what strategic thinking is, but more I want to talk about how do we get better at strategic thinking, or how do we actually become a strategic thinker. And I used the example in that first episode of someone who was going through a performance review and they were told you need to think more strategically. And it was just kind of a throwaway line in the performance review. And when they followed up on it or asked questions about it, the person doing their performance review actually couldn't articulate it very well, what it is to be a strategic thinker, what it takes to be a strategic thinker, and how do you know when you're being a strategic thinker. And it's something that, just like any other skill, we have to work at, or something that we should really need to focus on in order to get better. Like any other skill, the more we use it, the more we focus on developing it, the better we'll get at it, hopefully. So real quick, definition of strategic thinking. And strategic thinking is a proactive, future-oriented process that involves analyzing complex situations, anticipating challenges, and developing actionable strategies to achieve long-term goals, balancing creative problem solving with logical analysis. And that balance between creative problem solving or just being creative and logical analysis is something that I personally tried to focus on to develop to get better. So a couple more other ways to explain this, so breaking it down a bit further. Proactive and future-oriented. So strategic thinking isn't just about reacting to immediate problems. It's about anticipating future scenarios and planning for them. Now, you can't plan for every single future scenario that could potentially pop up, but you can think about future scenarios and where you want to take the organization to, and actually plan the pathways to get there. Now, your pathway probably always isn't going to be linear, so we constantly have to be reviewing that path and the route we're taking. Another thing you can say is it's analyzing complex situations. So it requires a comprehensive understanding of the environment in which you're operating in, including internal strengths and weaknesses, as well as external opportunities and threats. So going back to that old SWOT analysis and you and that. So matching your strengths with weaknesses and matching opportunities with threats to make sure you're operating in the best space possible. And developing actionable strategies. Strategic thinking translates analysis into concrete plans and actions that can be implemented to achieve desired outcomes. And it's taking those thoughts and those actionable strategies out of your head, making those strategies out of your head into actionable strategies and putting a process around it or plan around it and how you're going to reach them. And then balancing creativity and analysis, that's something I've mentioned just before, requires both creative thinking to identify innovative solutions and analytical skills to assess their feasibility and potential impact. And we'll talk further about this in a bit. Whenever you have these high in the sky ideas, that people might say that, what's the logical steps that you need to take in order to reach it? And is it feasible? And sometimes it might not seem possible at the very initial kind of concept of it, but as you start thinking about things more, bringing a team together around it to see if it is, a picture will start taking place and the pathway for you to get there will start taking place. And then that long-term focus. So strategic thinking is about setting goals and developing plans that will lead to success over the long term, not just short-term goals. And sometimes you can take those long-term goals and break them down into smaller short-term goals that as you achieve each one of those, you're getting closer and closer to achieving those long-term goals. So big thing about strategic thinking, it's about the future, thinking about the future and where you're going to be. Adaptability and flexibility. Strategic thinkers are adaptable and flexible. They're able to adjust their plans and strategies as circumstances change. And if you look at all the things that are happening around industry, just in general, in the economy and businesses, and what we're having to deal with, changes in focus in human behavior, AI, for example, different industry-wide or global-wide led initiatives, particularly around climate change and addressing climate change. All these things right now have big impacts on our business, but lots of big opportunities for our businesses. And thinking about these and where the future's heading could really set your organization up for success when you start taking all these things into account and understanding how to adapt your business in order to either address these needs or use those needs as a positive thing and help you achieve. So what are some key skills associated with strategic thinking? The first one I'd say is critical thinking. So you have to be able to analyze information and make sound judgment based off that information. Problem solving, identifying and resolving complex issues. Decision making, choosing the best course of action based on available information. One of the things I go back to quite often is a plan doesn't have to be perfect in order for it to be right. So sometimes you're not going to have every single bit of information you might need, but as long as you have enough available information or the information that's available to you to make a decision, then make a decision, get moving on the path. You can always adjust and be flexible as you go. Communication, another skill. So effectively conveying ideas and plans to other. A lot of these things in strategic direction will be in your head. They're going to come up as thoughts or creative ideas. You need to get them out of your head, get them onto some sort of either paper, for example, whiteboard, whatever, but get the team around these ideas, being able to communicate to them what it is you want to achieve and what your vision is, and then helping you actually execute the way to get there. And then the last key skill would be vision. Having a clear understanding of the future and the desired outcomes, and understanding where it is you want to take the organization and what it's going to look like for the organization when you do get to that point. It's incredibly important that you're able to think about that and have that vision to do it. So if we think about how do we actually get better at strategic thinking, or how can a leader get better at strategic thinking, this is something that even the most experienced leaders continue to explore throughout their entire working life, and probably their whole life, just even outside of professional work too. And it is a learned discipline. It's not just a trait that some people are born with. So that, like I said early on in this, the more you practice at it, the more you try to do these things to get better, the better you are going to get at it. And to get better at it, you need to intentionally sharpen your mind, your skills, and your habits. So I've come up with a few practical steps and things that you can do in order to try to become a better strategic thinker. So number one, shift from operator to architect. So this is the same thing, shifting from being operational to more strategic in your day-to-day. So operational work focuses on the day-to-day running of the business, those processes, procedures, and this is where you find a lot of management. While strategic thinking focuses on shaping the future. You need to deliberately shift how you allocate time and mental energy from that operational side of things to the future side of things. And a tip I heard, and I'm not sure I'm very good at this either, but you can use a 70-20-10 rule. So you spend 70% of your time on strategic priorities, 20% on enabling others, and then 10% on firefighting. By firefighting, I mean putting out the fires whenever they come up at work, these little things that need your attention immediately in order to keep moving forward. One of the things you can do is audit your calendar monthly and look at where you're spending your time. And another way to see how you're actually spending your time during the day is to potentially color code. You know, that 70% you want to spend on strategic priorities, code it blue in your calendar. The 20% on enabling others, make it yellow or green or something like that. And then the 10% on firefighting, putting out fires, taking care of those issues that pop up, color code it red. Then each month, go back and look at your previous 4 weeks and see where are you actually spending most of your time. And if you don't have that balance right, that 70-20-10, those percentages right, start to adjust your calendar. That's going to require you to look at what you're doing and whether or not you need to be involved with it. It's going to start making you look at what you're doing and whether or not you can delegate it or outsource it or insource it to somewhere else. But it really starts moving your days and your weeks to thinking more strategically, which if you're at the top level of an organization, this is where you're paid to spend most of your time. So it's where the board wants you to spend most of your time in moving the organization forward strategically. Tip number 2, practice systems thinking. So Strategic thinkers, they look beyond symptoms and they see the systems at play. So if you're looking at something, just what's happening, you're just looking at the system. So you can map out a cause and effect relationships when analyzing challenges. So there's something called a causal loop diagram that you can use. And you can constantly ask what patterns or structures are influencing these outcomes. So it's not just about what's happening and looking at what's happening, it's what's sitting behind that's making that happen. So whatever's happening, that's a symptom, or that's the byproduct of whatever's happening. So you need to learn to actually diagnose what's happening in order to fix the symptom. Number 3, read broadly and cross-functionally. So leaders who think strategically, they draw insights from multiple disciplines. It could be economics, psychology, technology, sustainability, and the list could go on and on and on. And one tip here could be read one book or listen to one podcast like you're doing now that is outside of your domain where you currently operate. If we are always just learning about the area in which we operate in, we tend to become very focused or at least narrow our focus over time, where if you're looking at things happening outside, whether it be another industry or an industry that's adjacent to you or something completely opposite, looking at this, it broadens your perspective and it broadens your minds and it gets you thinking about things that you're doing. Another thing you could do is attend events or forums in industries different for your own. Or for myself, I might try to go attend an industry conference in one where I might not feel as strong in that area, but I might have oversight over that area within my day-to-day role. So tip number 4, build time for strategic thinking. And this is one of the areas I think when I talk to other CEOs and senior executives, this is one where they struggle with the most, because you can get bogged down really quickly and regularly in the day-to-day things that are happening within the organization. And you can't think strategically in 5-minute gaps between meetings. So it requires space for deep, uninterrupted thought. And one of the big strategies you can use here is block out a larger block within your calendar each week and treat it as a non-negotiable. This is time, what I like to call life, limb, or eyesight time. So whenever it is blocked out in my calendar, you don't interrupt me unless someone's at danger of losing their life, limb, or eyesight. Anything else can wait. Then usually for me, it's 2 hours. So I try to do 2 hours a week when I sit back and I think about things strategically. I think about the future. I try to ask myself questions such as, what are the biggest external forces that could disrupt this organization? If I had to start this company again today, what would I do differently? If I gutted the whole organization right now and had to rebuild it from scratch, what would I do and how would I do it? And that gets you thinking about potentially antiquated ways of operating, but it gets you thinking about the future and what could be. Sometimes too, I might use this time to read that article that I've been wanting to read, to listen to that podcast, because as these things start going, they start sparking the imagination and they start sparking thoughts within you, and then it gets you thinking strategically. So tip number 5, develop strategic curiosity. So you need to cultivate that habit of questioning assumptions and exploring alternatives. So whenever someone proposes a solution, you can ask, what else could work? What would the opposite approach be like? And you can actually get someone to play devil's advocate. And it's not necessarily that you're trying to prove right or wrong, or someone's trying to poke holes in what you're doing, but it helps you see blind spots that you might not have thought about whenever you do these things, or whenever you get someone playing the opposite, so that devil's advocate. And then number 6, engage with diverse thinkers. Strategic insight often comes from conversation, not isolation. So whenever you have conversations with certain people, they're going to provoke your own thoughts, just like that strategic curiosity. They're going to bring up things and make you think about things and challenge your thinking around stuff. And you want to surround yourself with people that challenge your thinking. These could be mentors, peers, advisors, even skeptics who are against it. Well, why are they against it? What's their main objection? Find out what it is. And you can create that strategic advisory board for yourself, whether formal or informal, to test your ideas. I have some mates that I'll ring up sometimes and I'll throw an idea past them because I know they're incredibly successful in the area, but I know that their thinking is diverse from mine. So it's quite different, or their perspective is, and I want to know what they think about it. And I value that input, and it does help me to continue to formulate either the feasibility or that strategic outcome, whatever it is. So tip number 7, and this is probably more for people that are very process oriented, use a strategic framework and use it often. Sometimes familiarity with proven tools helps you think more deeply and consistently. So some of these are like Porter's 5 forces, that's around industrial competition. Blue ocean strategy, that's around innovation and differentiation. Balanced scorecard, so that's aligning strategy to performance. I personally like to use balanced scorecards when I'm developing my KPIs for a strategy. And then scenario planning, exploring future possibilities, and you can do this in various different ways. Another thing you can use is strategy maps. I like to use those too, and those are Porter also had developed those. And then tip number 8, reflect on strategic decisions. And this goes back to a lot of things we do, so we can learn from the past to improve future choices. Anytime you make a major decision, conduct a strategic review. What worked, what didn't, what blind spots emerged. And as you start to look at these things and doing these after action reviews, you can prepare yourself. And it's not just doing them, it's a one-off thing. It's doing them and then referring back to those learnings, and so you can implement them in the next strategic direction that you take. So you can use those pre and postmortems for key initiatives within each one of those strategic, decisions or the strategic outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and really make yourself better. And as you learn, again, there's going to be different challenges that pop up with everyone, no matter what. If they're all exactly the same, you're probably not making a lot of progress, if any at all. So there's always going to be things that pop up. There's always going to be blind spots. There's always going to be roadblocks. There's always going to be curves in your path. But as long as you stick to some of these, you're going to constantly improve your thinking. So whenever you do face those obstacles, you're going to be able better to navigate around them. Just remember this, that getting better at strategic thinking is a journey, just like anything else that we're trying to learn. And it's not about having the perfect answer, but consistently applying the discipline to see farther, think deeper, and lead with intent. So I want you to think about these things the next time that you're sitting back thinking to yourself, am I a strategic thinker? How do I get better as a strategic thinker? And let me know how you go. I'm really curious about this. So, how I am, the majority of my podcast topics come from listeners who ask me questions or do follow-ups with me. So please let me know what you think. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you again soon.